It's my great honor to introduce to Louisville and to Forecastle, Robert Kennedy Jr.
Thank you. I'm really back. I'm really happy to be back here in Louisville. And I want to thank Bobby Letkees and UPS, a great company, for sponsoring my appearance here today. And then I want to also thank John Yarmouth. I had John on my radio show earlier this week. I think it's going to play on Saturday and Sunday. But I love what he said about the river here. This is a maritime city. It's here because of that river, and yet in so many ways, and the law of Kentucky says that every child in Kentucky, whether you're rich or poor, young or old, humble or noble, every person in this community, every small boy and every small girl has a right to throw a fishing lure into that river, bring out a catfish, bring it home, feed it to their family with pride and with the security that they're not poisoning somebody. But that right has been stolen from the people of Louisville because every fish in that river is now too poisonous to safely eat, and particularly for a child. And that's an act of theft. Environmental crimes are real crimes. And what the law says is everybody in the state has a right to use that river, and the fish is in it, you own it. They're not owned by the coal companies, they're not owned by the governor or the legislature, they're not owned by the big hog farms or by the agribusiness or Monsanto, but they are now because those companies have privatized them. They've stolen them from the public, so the public can't use them anymore. And that's what environmental injury is. John understands this, and it's one of the issues that he ran on and articulated was, we're not protecting the environment so much for the sake of the fishes and the birds. We're protecting it for our own sake, because we recognize that nature is the infrastructure of our communities. And if we want to meet our obligation as a generation, as a civilization, as a nation, which is to create communities for our children that provide them with the same opportunities for dignity and enrichment and prosperity and good health as the communities that our parents gave us, we've got to start by protecting our environmental infrastructure. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the shared resources of our society, the commons, the public trust assets, the wildlife, the fisheries, the public lands, the forests, the rivers, the landscapes that connect us to our past, to our history, that provide context to our communities, and that are the source ultimately of our values and our virtues and our character as a people. I did an article a couple of weeks ago. Bobby was talking about the fuel efficiency in his fleet, and what he will tell you is that by acting good, his company is doing well. And that when we invest in the environment, in doing good things for the environment, that it makes all of our communities wealthier. And that ultimately it's a good business decision. We don't have to choose between prosperity and the environment. They're 100% of the time, they're the same thing. And I did a piece for Vanity Fair a couple of months ago where I quoted a speech by Lord David Putnam, who's a member of Parliament. And Parliament at the time, this was in November, was debating a cap-and-trade system to address global warming, and to its credit, Parliament ultimately passed this very strong bill. But there were people, and in England, they don't have the same thing that we have here. They have been bombarded by propaganda by Exxon and Chevron and their indentured servants in our political process, and their phony think tanks on Capitol Hill like the Heritage Foundation, the American Enterprise Institute, the Competitive Enterprise Institute, and all of these, they're phony tobacco scientists. We call them biostitutes. These guys who are saying there's no such thing as global warming. They haven't had that in England, so everybody in England realized that global warming is real, that its impacts are going to be catastrophic. We have to do something about it. But there's still vested interests and other people who are just concerned, who are concerned that we don't move too quickly, that we should move slowly and incrementally and deliberately, because if we do otherwise, it could leave our economy in ruins. And Lord David Putnam made this point. He reminded Parliament that exactly 200 years before, the same body had debated the abolition of slavery, the slave trade. And at that time, everybody in England recognized that the slave trade was a moral catastrophe for their nation. But there were people who said, we have to move slowly, because the slave trade at that time represented 25% of the GNP of Great Britain, and it was the largest source of energy for the entire British Empire, free human labor. And they said, if we abolish it outright, it's going to leave our economy in ruins. At the end of the year, Parliament did abolish it outright. And instead of collapsing, the British economy exploded as tens of thousands of entrepreneurs flooded into that space and began devising ways of making energy out of other sources, mainly mechanical, and that's what launched the Industrial Revolution, which was the greatest epic in wealth creation in the history of mankind. And the abolition of the slave trade had exposed these hidden inefficiencies that were connected with free human labor. Now, we don't need to abolish carbon to recognize that it is the principal drag on American capitalism today. We are borrowing $1 billion a day in this country, mainly from people who don't like us and don't share our values, to buy oil from people who don't like us and don't share our values. And this is what's caused the collapse of the American dollars. We're giving $1 trillion a year in subsidies to the oil industry and about $1 trillion a year in subsidies to the coal industry every year, and huge subsidies also to the nuke industry. These incumbents, which are blocking and impeding much more efficient types of energy and forms of energy from flooding into the marketplace. We need a marketplace in this country that does what a free market is supposed to do. We do not have a free market in this country when it comes to energy. We have a marketplace. We need a market that does what a market's supposed to do, which is to reward good behavior, which is efficiency, and punish bad behavior, which is inefficiency and waste. But right now we have market rules that are rigged to reward the filthiest, most inefficient producers in our marketplace. And this is what's causing our economy to collapse in this country. If you look at any of the nations who have decarbonized their societies, you immediately see in every case they have experienced immediate prosperity. Iceland in 1970 was the poorest country in Europe. It was 100% dependent on imported coal and oil. But Iceland decided they were going to get off of carbon because they saw that they were one of the first nations to see the impacts of global warming, because it impacts the northern latitudes disproportionately. They said, for moral reasons, we've got to get off of coal and oil. Today, and again, there were people vested interest in the society that said we can't do it too quickly, but Iceland government went ahead and did it. And today, Iceland is 100% energy independent. They get 90% of their electricity from geothermal. And today, Iceland is the 4th richest country by GDP in the world. And it's one of the biggest energy exporters in the world today as well. It can't run lines across the Atlantic, so it imports bauxite from Jamaica, and it uses its surplus energy to smelt it into aluminum. Then it sells the aluminum ingots all over the world, and that's its way of exporting energy. 15 years ago, a corporation would not dream of relocating to Iceland. But today, corporations are lined up to get into Iceland to take advantage of this cheap, abundant, and clean energy and the high quality of life that goes along with it. Sweden in 1996 decided to decarbonize their society and to get rid of nuclear energy. They put a $150 tax on carbon. They closed their 2 biggest nuclear power plants. And today, Sweden is the 6th richest country by GDP in the world. And what happened again is entrepreneurs rush into that space to create new forms of energy from solar, from wind, from tidal, from geothermal, from conservation, from sawmill waste, from putrid garbage. And today, the wealth affects every human being in Sweden. Costa Rica, which decarbonized most of its economy, is now the richest country in Central America. Brazil, for the first time from decarbonizing its economy, is going to be able to educate every child in Brazil to pass high school, which has never happened before in history. California, which is the most energy efficient state in our country, is also by far the richest. We have the technology today to accomplish this, and to accomplish it very quickly, more quickly than any of